welcoming, which I like. And
Reverend Petra Thombs is the minister at Unitarian Universal Congregation of Central Nassau in Garden City. Graduate of Union Theological Seminary, she holds a Master's of Divinity along with a Master's of Science from Bank Street College in Supervision and Administration. Her initial Master's of Special Education is from Teachers College, Columbia University. Reverend Petra has served as community minister for the Ramapo Lenape Community Center. Her passion is history and culture of indigenous communities, advocating for rescinding of the doctrine of discovery.
Good morning on this wonderful, beautiful day. Welcome to worship here at the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm Sandra Frank, chair of the worship committee here at UUCSR, a congregation that values the shared leadership of clergy and laity. Whether you're a visitor, a newcomer, or a longtime member of this congregation, you are welcome here. Whatever you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. In this community, we use science, reason, and an open heart to explore life's many mysteries. To learn more about this congregation and Unitarian Universalism, please visit our welcome desk in the lobby or go to our website. It's UUCSR.org. The Board of Trustees invites you into the fuller life of this congregation. Please join us for lunch in the social hall, which is immediately following the service. If you are a first or a second-time visitor, lunch is on us, and you go, if I'm not mistaken, you go to the welcome desk to get the pass. Just a reminder, our worship service will be in the Veach Ballroom next week. It'll be at the same time, it'll be at 11 a.m. Our annual summer concert will be on Sunday, August 3rd, next week, at 1:30 p.m. The orchestra at Shelter Rock will present Gustav Mahler's transcendent masterpiece called Das Lied von der Erde, or Song of the Earth. UUCSR's music director, Stephen Michael Smith, will lead the orchestra in a work that speaks to us today as urgently as it did upon its conception. It was written in 1908. Soloists for the performance will be tenor Brian Jeffers and baritone Billy Heiler. They say seating is limited, so tickets are available both in advance and at the door. Please visit our website or talk to any staff member here to help you with booking these tickets. At Shelter Rock, we aspire to be a loving, religious community where we can grow spiritually and build a more just and joyful world. You are welcome to join us on this journey. Thank you.
Good morning. It is wonderful to be with you today, and we are all so grateful for this overcast day and the coolness of the morning. It is a blessing. We gather today in this sacred space, this home of liberal religion, whose mission is truth for the sake of justice. We are grateful to be together, to gather as community, committed to lifting up each other in difficult days, and taking care to renew our spirits. We, as part of a greater Unitarian Universalist community, light our chalice in faith, holding on to ancient roots of ancestors who ground us in our beliefs and the right to question. We light our chalice with hope that allows us to persevere through tender times in anticipation of a brighter future. We light our chalice holding on to love, to be in right relations with each other, as love is the center of all we do and believe in. Join with me in community and say, Amen.
Child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions, sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the songs of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Please remain standing for our words of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, This do we affirm and covenant with each other.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of faith and hope arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung through every land, by every tongue.
You may all be seated. Each Sunday, we have an opportunity toward living our Unitarian Universalist values in the world by our acts of generosity. During the months of July and August, we are invited to support Rewild Long Island, which is dedicated to protecting and improving the biodiversity, resilience, and health of regional ecosystems. This is achieved by adopting sustainable landscaping practices centered on the use of native plants. Our community is invited to support Rewild Long Island financially and to add our own acts of balance and conservation in this ecosystem of this precious planet to which we belong. And there is a QR code, and anybody can go to the website, and we do have a donation box right outside of the door. And thank you all.
Each Sunday, we share an opportunity towards living our Unitarian Universalist values in the world by acts of generosity to bring positive change. Months of July and August, we are invited to support Rewild Long Island, which is dedicated to collaborating with local communities across Long Island to protect and improve the biodiversity, resilience, and health regional ecosystems. This is achieved by adopting sustainable landscaping practices centered on the use of native plants. Rewild employs practical demonstrations to engage, educate, and inspire the community. For example, our Sustainable Garden Tour. It showcases the beauty and practicality of sustainable landscaping. Participants visit various gardens that features pollinator patches, rain gardens, meadows, and low-maintenance lawns, providing real-life demonstrations of how sustainable practices can be implemented in everyday settings. Rewild believes that by leading by example, they can pursue more people to adopt sustainable landscaping as a path to climate resilience, biodiversity, clean air and water, and the overall well-being of our Long Island community. Our community is invited to support Rewild Long Island financially to add our own acts of conservation and balance in the ecosystem of the precious planet to which we belong. Below are ways to give. There are 5 ways. 1, use the QR code. Open up the camera app on your phone. Hold your phone so the QR code appears in view, but don't take a photo. Tap the notification to open the donation page on the UUCSR website. Number 2, you can go on paypal.com to send money to donate@uucsr.org. Or 3, pay by check by dropping in the collection box in the main lobby or by mailing it to the UUCSR Financial Office. Please enter Summer Offering in the memo line. 4, drop cash into the donation box. 5, you can also go to the giving page at UUCSR.org to set up a one-time or recurrent payment. Thank you for your generosity.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
I will share this prayer with you, which was an outpouring of my heart when we think of where we are in the world today. Blessings on this day for the opening up of vistas towards peace. We clamor through noise and cannot seem to rise above the chaos of confusion, wrecked and reactionary. We lose our way. But it does not need to be. We are all chosen to open like fields of flowers blooming in our own seasons. You have been created to be boundless, beautiful, and bountiful in your own definition of beauty. Let us stay with that thought for a while. Our wounds come from forgetting the wonder that has been created, from not seeing ourselves as whole, and preventing our flower siblings from growing in their own way. If only we can be free enough to free ourselves and to free others, we would learn to be as boundless as God, as Creator, as loving and as thriving. Grow in faith that does not need to control. Even you, who is God, does not seek to control us, but allows us our free will. May we take in the air, drink in the refreshing waters, and stand on our Mother who has birthed us. Creation is ever present, yet changing. May we grow to wisdom and grace beneath the sky as we hold on to one another tenderly, sweetly, gracefully, building bonds of understanding, feeling the connection of our souls in the wonder of this world. Let us just have a moment of silence for our spirits. Amen.
We've gone back to the tradition of lighting candles, if we wish, for both sorrows and glad tidings. So we invite you all to come up now, I'll light a candle.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me. Come to me.
If we sat in a circle and put an object in the center of the circle, and we all described what we saw, everyone would see different points of view from each other. Some would even see opposites because they're sitting on the opposite sides of the circle. In other words, you don't have to see what I see for you to be right. In fact, everyone in the circle is right based on their own point of view. If we are willing to listen to everyone's point of view, then we can get a more accurate description of the object in the center. This is one way to put our minds together. When we get clarity from each other, we should give thanks and be grateful to each other. Aho. This is from Ivan Powerless Sr., Orindata.
It's a great big sky, and there's room enough for all under underneath the great big sky where the earth's a little ball, and a man ain't much, but yet a man is all that stands up tall between the earth and God, beneath the great big sky. The fish in the sea, the birds that fly, the elephants and bees are all part of the why, that great big why that keeps a man wondering all night long, a wondering, a fretting and wondering beneath the great big sky. The fish don't do no wondering, the birds don't ask no why, but men keep fretting and wondering till they come to die. I know the night will pass, I know the dark will go, I know the dawn will come all right, I know for all this fret and wonder, just a kind of worried thunder in a storm cloud rolling by, before the big sun rises in the sky.
Thank you for your artistry. So beautiful. So, today I'm going to share with you my findings on the lasting impact of instituting celibacy. I know you couldn't wait to get out of bed to learn all about this. So, my body, my right. Right? My body, my right. Right? Ah. So how did we get here? Okay. I chose this topic in the wake of the election of the first United States-born Pope and the pressing issue of bodily autonomy for women. But before I get to the topic of bodily autonomy for religious clerics, I wanted to share a little bit of an article I recently read on the topic of women. And it was by a 92-year-old woman who was finally revealing her secret, a secret that she carried for 56 years. When their third child was finally in school, she found that she was pregnant despite using an IUD. She felt overwhelmed. Neither she nor her husband wanted another child, and yet the procedure was illegal. Her doctor looked at her and said, "Well, if you both agree that you do not want another child, call my office and tell the receptionist that you are having very heavy bleeding." His suggestion brought a wave of relief. She had a way to escape. And despite the risk to his own career, he was going to help them. The next day, she called the doctor's office, and the doctor did indeed help them. She never told anyone, but was grateful for the risk he took and felt that he was saving their family. So many women have needed that chance to breathe, to have their lives saved, to manage the number of children that they would bring into the world because they just couldn't have endless numbers. They needed to limit, and they knew that they could take care of the children that were actually going to be born. they needed to make their choice. That 92-year-old woman could not believe that today women are in the same predicament that she was in so many years ago. Women are being denied choice, and their physicians run tremendous risks to help them. I find it interesting that choice, bodily autonomy, has for centuries been restricted for men, specifically clerics, and for reasons that we will be unpacking today. So I made a little list of the stuff that we're going to talk about, just to give you a little heads up. So let us consider. We will be defining celibacy. It's important to be clear about what that means. We're going to look at Hebrew versus Greek thinking, because I'm going to talk about that. And what about Jesus? How does he fit into this? Because you know he's in the mix somewhere. And how did we go from married priests to celibate priests? Okay. So, my own history with the Catholic Church has created my desire to understand this, along with my frustration with institutions finding ways to manipulate the rights of people to live their lives. I have always said that every one of us comes into the world through the body of a woman. Yes. Yes? Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Yes. Okay. But women are not valued in our society to the same degree as men. Our society is reconstructing its patriarchy despite our ancient matrilineal beginnings. As a former Catholic, I have always been concerned about the origin of compulsory celibacy. The word celibacy only means alone. That's all. From the Latin word celibus, it refers to singleness. It does not mean sexual abstinence. This word does not correspond to any biblical term. Ancient Hebrew has no word for bachelor, and the single state was not treated as a lofty goal for resolute individuals. The Greek term monos, meaning alone, from which monk and monastic were derived, is not associated with the New Testament, with monks or hermits. A priest is called to celibacy through a public commitment before God and the Church, obligated to renounce all sexual intercourse for life. So to say mandatory celibacy is a bit redundant, because the word celibacy itself, as used by Catholics, pertains to a required sexual abstinence. Holy orders, or ordination of a priest, is a sacrament that reinforces the seriousness of the commitment, placing it on par with holy matrimony. Priests must vow to remain faithful to their religious obligation or risk divine and ecclesiastical penalties. One is therefore married to Christ's church and gives his own body to that service. However, the reality of living celibacy has brought about more corruption in the church and disillusionment of the faithful than the corruption that the reform efforts sought to correct. The views on human sexuality in Western culture have evolved out of ancient Greece. While ancient Hebrews have always honored marriage and progeny, we know that rabbis are married clergy. Sexuality as seen as fulfilling and a sign of social maturity. But the Greeks repressed sexual desire, instead prized the intellect for a healthy soul and mind. They insisted on sexual purity for priests, and virginity was held as a high honor. One should endure and abstain from sex at all costs. So, given that, what about Jesus? Was he a model priest? Traditionally, we are taught Jesus was a single man, that Jesus was celibate. No, it's not. This argument has been used to justify priestly celibacy. It's interesting to me that Paul, who arrived way after Jesus, would state after Jesus' life, makes no reference to Jesus as a celibate Jew. He would instead speak about himself and use himself as a prime example. I wish that all of you could be like me. Now, Paul himself was either a widower or a divorcee. Given his political position in the temple, he could not have been unmarried. Likewise, Jesus would have been condemned for being unmarried. Long before he was crucified, he would not have fit into Jewish culture because he was a rabbi and he would have been married. Interesting. We know nothing of his early life before his preaching ministry, and there is no Christian sources supporting Jesus as celibate. Paul believed he was living in the end of days, so that was his rationale for celibacy. He thought the world was going to come to an end. Okay. So Paul asked, do we not have the right to be accompanied by a believing wife, as do other apostles of the Lord? Paul's message was about mutuality between partners. He argues partners are equally obligated to surrender their bodies to one another for sexual satisfaction. He defends marital intercourse as both a right and a duty. Unfortunately, Paul does not flesh out the understanding that marriage is deeper in relationship than warding off temptations of the flesh. Any treatment of relationship and partnership is missing in his letters, although compared to his interpreters, he is much more supportive of marriage than not, especially in those letters which are attributed to him but were written by someone else posing as him. These are called Deuteropaul, the letters of Ephesians, Colossians, Timothy 1 and 2, and Titus. They are not Paul's writings. I was surprised to find that out. And some of you may be surprised to find that out. Christianity grew up in Europe, where forces outside of it reviled the physical world. There was a particular example. His name is Origen. He was a highly influential cleric of the 7th century. He mutilated himself to prove his disdain for the physical flesh. Another example was Marcion. You may have heard of Augustine, and all were infamous in their reviled beliefs on the evils of sex. Their teachings had lasting effects and helped to introduce celibacy to the medieval era. Yes, it would be the medieval era, right? Yes. This is the beginning of putting constraints on the clergy, impacting their right to bodily autonomy. So, what was really instigating all of this thought about men being alone and celibate? Something called simony. Now, it had to do with economics. So, let's see what this is about. The church clergy became the economic equal of the lords of the manor of the day. Having adopted the standards of a secular life, they held tremendous political power. And in many instances, the laity, who were not ordained clergy, saw their power diminishing and the church becoming more of a dominating force with land and money. This had a secondary effect. As these positions became more desirable, families would position themselves, becoming clerics, to partake. You may have seen this in your lifetime. A family had 5 sons, and at least 2 of them were expected to become priests. This led to many opportunities for corruption. Count Hans III von Württemberg stipulated in his testament of 1451 that if none of his 3 lay sons or their male heirs were alive at the time of his death, then one of my clerical sons, who is not yet a priest and who wishes to become a layman, should take over the lordship. The children of the wealthy at that time did not always survive. Families were concerned about protecting their lineage, and therefore the lines between church and laity became blurred. Most issues were about the money. Bishops and abbots were becoming the peers of princes. The practice of any and every form of commercialism in clerical matters became known as simony. The greater issue of this practice was that clerical religious authorities had to be approved by lay authorities despite the complaints of religious leaders, and the bishops were also landholders who had to uphold their obligations under feudalism, for which they needed support in all of his undertakings. And these actions made the cleric more of a businessman and marginalized his activities as a religious leader. The biggest consideration was of the family of the cleric. Would they be in line to inherit the land and property of the church? Would dowry monies be taken from the church for their daughters, therefore diverting funds from their original purpose in supporting the church? Now, the ordinary priest, aside from the bishop, did not have the cares of owning much land, and was more alike with the common folk as a married cleric. They shared much of the same life. Indeed, their hold upon their parishioners may well have been strengthened by their nearer approach to the common ways of living. Something else that most of us do not know is that the greatest majority of clergymen from the early church to the time of Gregory the Great in the 10th century were married. Clerical marriage was openly defended as late as the 10th century. As the frequency of married popes diminished, papal sex scandals increased. Despite the ruling of celibacy, popes, such as Alexander III, had concubines in the Vatican chambers. Priests continued to engage in relations with concubines to the degree it was considered the functional equivalent to marriage. In many cases, it was practiced frequently and openly throughout the medieval era. Another example of impropriety took place in the 11th century London at St. Paul's Church, where the sons of married priests inherited their father's position. Benedict VIII then proposed modification to laws to protect the vast land holdings of the church. The evils of clerical marriage was condemned by Pope Leo IX in 1049. He ruled, this was a tough one, he ruled that the wives of priests were to be seized and sold into slavery. They tried to promote this idea to other churches. Now, have you ever wondered why the Eastern Orthodox Church is separate from the Roman Catholic Church? No? You never wondered that? Oh, gee. You're not a church nerd like I am. Okay. The schism resulted over clerical marriages. When the representative of Rome went to Constantinople in 1054, he tried to persuade Patriarch Michael of the evils of the flesh of young priests. having relationships with their wives, then serving communion. He called the interaction evil and not a mark of true faith. And he promptly excommunicated his host, Patriarch Michael, who then in turn excommunicated him and the Latin Church leaders for prohibiting the marriage of priests. That's right. This is why the schism between Eastern and Western Catholic Church has never been healed from that date to the present. Interesting. The intended goal of celibacy was to create a barrier between clergy and laity, something of a badge of honor, to elevate and create a sign of purity in the flesh. At a time when everyone was called to be holy, celibacy would be a guarantee that clergy would be above the status of lay people. They would be the representation of Christ to his church. So, how does this get enforced? Gregory XIV was the enforcer. The greatest stride in eliminating marriages for clerics and promoting celibacy was Hildebrand, a Benedictine abbot, who placed stringent safeguards to prevent any breaking of the celibate code. He became Pope Gregory XII in 1073, and he sought to centralize the power of the Pope. He used his former tactics as abbot, monitoring monks in dormitories to prevent sexual activity, to exert control over the Catholic clergy of his time. He believed in purity and cleanliness and led him to consistently state that sex and the habits of the flesh defiled those who participated in them, especially those who stood as clerics. These acts did not lift the clergy, but removed them from being worthy to perform their sacred duties. A letter from Gregory XII concerning the chastity of priests said, "I command you to apply yourselves with more energy to preaching and enforcing the celibacy of the clergy according to the edicts of the fathers and the authority of the canons, so that the service of a pure and unspotted family may be offered to the bride of Christ, who knows no spot or wrinkle. Know that these orders are not of our own invention, but that we proclaim them as decrees of the ancient fathers, taught to them by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Now, for the more complete and efficient execution of the orders we have given, we urge you to call a council of your fellow bishops." So Gregory continued his crusade against married priests when he realized that the bishops were not following his orders. Many local clergy physically threatened their bishops, which prevented this agenda from moving forward. But he persisted with additional correspondence. The Pope was angry that bishops were not enforcing these laws. He would enforce the law rather than allow men to lose their souls. He tells his emissary to publish and urge the king to comply. He would remove clerics from serving from sacred mysteries. And in this way, Gregory incited the laity against married priests, encouraging them to take matters into their own hands, and they did so often with violent ends. It was reported on the outcome of Gregory's radical actions. Some clerics were reduced to poverty or homelessness. Others were mutilated and publicly paraded through the streets. Still others submitted to torture, imprisonment, lingering death. And many of the wives of clergy were mocked, abused, shamed, some of them driven to madness, and others found dead in their beds, taking their own lives. Much of the outrage over the Pope's stance on celibacy was due to his own personal life. Take a guess. His association with a woman was a scandalous outrage for the whole Christian world. So do as I say, not as I do. Many Many of you may have heard of Thomas Aquinas. Yes? Oh, good. Just as the close of papal marriages became the cause of papal scandals, so too the ends of priests' marriages brought about more harm than good. Prostitution grew at a rapid rate. In many respects, concubines were encouraged. Thomas Aquinas, considered the pillar of medieval orthodoxy and elevated to sainthood, believed, like Augustine, that marriage was a concession to human weakness, based on the fall of those disobedient humans, Adam and Eve. He condoned prostitution to alleviate the urge which could bring about more serious sins. Of course, if masturbation had been allowed, there would not have been a need for prostitutes. He was again trying to preserve the priest's hands needed to be pure for the sacrament of communion. Okay, go ahead, laugh. I hear you. Okay. So much for the soul of the woman forced to prostitute herself. But then this was the medieval era. Those women who had cohabitated with priests, even in committed relationships, had no rights. And the children of their liaisons were stigmatized as bastards. Aquinas borrowed his thinking from Aristotle's definition of woman. The female is a defective male. Therefore, she is inferior to males in mind, body, and spirit. She is even inferior to a male slave. Aquinas compared prostitution to a sewer, moving the filth away from the city. His thoughts on the subject were aligned with Augustine, who said, if you do away with prostitutes, the world would be convulsed with lust. Okay. Aquinas believed that rape, adultery, incest, and fornication were lesser offenses than sodomy, as these acts could produce a child. Therefore, the greatest sin was to waste the sperm. This was why masturbation has been so demonized, causing such guilt among the faithful. It is droned into people that they are doing something awful. And this is the reason why. My body, my right. There were efforts to name Aquinas as a radically dangerous thinker, but we know those efforts failed. Now, in regard to homosexuality, it is also important to note that homosexuality in medieval times was initially judged against clerics. It was considered a perversion of nature, even though Jesus made no mention of it in the Gospels anywhere. It is only after Christianity became the religion of the state that this conduct was severely punished. However, as the movement against married priests expanded, so did the place of gay priests in medieval church. John Boswell, a historian on homosexuality, states, the approach to sexuality adopted by early 12th century theologians effectively decriminalized homosexual relations altogether. The church understood that gay priests would be more willing than heterosexual ones to enforce prohibitions against clerical marriage. Sociologist David Greenberg observes, homosexual relationships did not result in progeny and therefore threatened the preservation of church property. The church has become the largest employer of gay priests. And what about the women? The author of When Women Were Priests, Karen Jo Torgensen, writes that from the 4th century to the 12th, the church struggled to impose celibacy on clerics. With Christianity's rise to becoming a state religion, the church adopted attitudes of gender roles from the Greco-Roman mindset. Those who insisted on celibacy believed female sexuality to be an uncontrollable and threatening force. Pope Innocent III in 1139 created the legal platform for ostracizing priests' wives by declaring that all marriages after ordination invalid. Immediately, wives became illegitimate. They were now adulteresses and concubines. During the Inquisition, a belief emerged that conflated female sexuality with demons. This created the medieval witch. This paradigm evolved to such a degree that it heavily impacted the persecution of women. Torgenson explains, while the machinery of the Inquisition was in the hands of the papacy, it was dependent on the willingness of the populace to denounce and the willingness of the nobility to execute. Millions of women were burned at the stake for the heresy of witchcraft during Europe's Inquisition. So were there people to stand up against this madness? Those who opposed promoting celibacy were punished vehemently for their views. John Huss, a priest and scholar on trial for his beliefs, asked, "Has not God himself instituted marriage to satisfy the craving for love in all men? Is not he who becomes a priest also of flesh and blood? I hold this to be the seed of iniquity and the root of all evil, the fact that a priest does not marry. He turns to the other sex, baits those who have husbands, lures those who are widows, or those who are simple maidens." Desideratus Erasmus was a 15th century priest. His father was a priest, and he would joke about the appropriateness of the title father for most priests. His concerns about open lechery and continued illegitimacy made celibacy a failure. He wrote a book that stated, "I would like to see permission given to priests and monks to marry, especially since there is such a horde of priests among whom chastity is rare. How much better to make concubines into wives and openly acknowledge the partners now held in infamy. How much better to have children to love and rear religiously as legitimate offspring of whom there is no need to be ashamed and who in turn will honor their sires. I think that bishops would long since have given this permission if they did not derive more income from the taxes on concubines than they could reap from wives. Why refrain from what God institutes? Nature sanctions, reason persuades, divine and human laws approve, the consent of all nations endorses, and to which the highest examples exhort. You are bound to friends in affection. How much more to a wife in the highest love, with union of the body, the bond of the sacrament, and the sharing of your goods. Nothing is more safe, felicitous, tranquil, pleasant, and loving than marriage." I agree. Erasmus's beautiful sentiments were condemned and burned in 1525, and Huss was burned at the stake. Okay. So except for these two clerics, who were considered heretics, where was love for human beings? I want to pause a bit, as this was particularly heavy. Sorry, I know it's summer. Sorry, but we now know more than ever we could have imagined about the ruling authority of a church acting like an authoritarian government. The institution went into the homes and private lives of its people to protect its material assets under the guise of protecting souls. So much harm has come from this. So much harm continues as women and children continue to be trafficked and enslaved. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has brought about unsafe medical practices for women's health care. We have the right to be safe healthy, and to love ourselves and our partners. It is part of our maturation to grow into adulthood and to have offspring. It is a matter of personal choice to be alone and therefore celibate. What happens on your own is your business. What happens between consenting adults is between you. And let there be love, care and concern, and beauty in the fulfillment of your lives. Erasmus was right. Why refrain from what God institutes, nature sanctions, reason persuades, divine and human laws approve, the consent of all nations endorses, and to which the highest examples exhort? You are bound to friends in affection, how much more to a wife in the highest love, with union of the body, the bonds of the sacrament, and the sharing of your goods. Nothing is more safe, felicitous, tranquil, pleasant, and lovable than marriage. My remarks are not to bash Catholicism. There was a time when the institution wielded untold power as a state religion. It ruled with the strength of a government, and this government imposed laws which impacted the male body, which led to the revolt, which was the Protestant Reformation. Any institution which harms people must be held accountable, even our own Unitarian Universalist Association. Knowing the truth of how these actions occur is important in our own liberation from misinformation. We can see how the actions of the Church set in motion the harm of misogyny that damaged people's lives and continues to affect our society's discourse. I'd be happy to speak with you further, should you like, and know that your community is here to support you with love at the center of who we are and what we value. May it be so. And now for number 1053, how could anyone? Please rise.
How could anyone ever tell you you're anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
And may we continue to hold to our covenant and be community, even as we part from one another. For the light of our faith continues to shine in our hearts and will be there renewed until we are together again. And for our chalice extinguishing, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Okay.